presentation for tonight is on the case for Cape independence, and I'm highly motivated on this. We have been, over the years, encouraging people to think Cape independence, and I think this is an idea whose time has come. The case for Cape independence. Jeremiah 6, verse 16 to 17 says, "Thus says the Lord, stand in the ways of the sea and ask for the old paths, where the good way is, and walk in it. Then you will find rest for your souls. Also I set watchmen over you, saying, listen to the sound of the trumpet." This reminds one in days of Nehemiah, when the city of Jerusalem's walls had been broken down. They need to rebuild the walls. He said, listen for the sound of the trumpet. Where the trumpet sounds, rally to that part of the wall that's under attack. And so working together we can achieve so much more. Now, what is the crisis that confronts us? The cost of unstable, inefficient, expensive and unreliable energy in South Africa is a staggering 89 billion rand per month. And that's billion with a B, not million, billion. And that's not Zimbabwe dollars. We're talking about 89 billion rand per month in lost production, revenue losses and wastage. And that sounds already pretty bad. But just think, if you're a small family business and you're trying to run your little restaurant or shop, and you've got your customers in there, power goes out. And the food's half cooked, you lose the customers, you waste the food, you've lost revenue. I mean, this can be catastrophic for some small businesses. So now they've got to go and buy a generator, and they've got to get extra fuel and so on. And then, of course, the cost of all electricity has been going up at the same time. So this dirty, worthless, inefficient Eskom, which now, there was a time when Eskom was producing some of the cheapest electricity in the world. And by the way, they were producing twice as much as Eskom's producing now at 1/20th the price. And at the time, I don't think any of us thought that Eskom was efficient and good. But now we're looking at, it was at that stage one of the cheapest electricity in the world and one of the most reliable. And today it's one of the most expensive and one of the least reliable. So if you wondered why electricity is costing so much, well, you know, look no further than some interesting load shedding in like Mandela-ville. Central government in South Africa is corrupt. I'm sure we all know this. It's complicated. If you've ever tried to get a driver's license for your son or something like that, you know, it's frustrating, it's unnecessarily time wasting, and that's the whole point. It's not meant to be efficient. But even though they've got witch doctors praying over it and being praise singers for Uncle Nelson or Zuma or whoever. And this is what opening of Parliament now looks like. It used to be a very regal, impressive thing. Now even gold card carrying members of Parliament are getting hosed and beaten up by the police and arrested in this case, which is actually completely illegal, but don't worry about that because the Emperor is fined. And the fact that they use the word the honourable inside is a relic of a bygone era, because there's nothing honourable about these characters in red in there. And this is what they call opening of Parliament these days. You know, you used to have 21 gun salutes fly past by the Air Force, and they might do some kind of vapor trail, but now they tear gas people. Racist black economic empowerment and affirmative action policies with racial quotas, not only in business but in sports, has led many millions to leave this country, including over 1 million skilled workers. Every skilled labour on average provides employment for 10 unskilled labourers. So by chasing out people out of this country, they're chasing out a whole lot of people that they would have employed. With 1 million skilled labourers having left South Africa over the last 23 years, the cumulative loss of employment in the country is staggering. Let me just give one example. I stayed in the home of Dr. Christopher Knott Craig in Oklahoma some time ago. He used to live in Pines. He was a kidney and heart transplant specialist, in fact the top kidney and heart transplant specialist in the world at Curtis Cure. He had been personally trained and mentored by Chris Barnard, the pioneer. There'd never be someone else like this because Chris Barnard's gone. And then what happened? Our Minister of Health, for want of a better word, put a moratorium on transplants. And what is a transplant specialist like Christopher Knott Craig to do? At that point, Oklahoma University snapped him up, and like hundreds of thousands of other top-class, irreplaceable leaders from this country now living in Oklahoma City, working for University of Oklahoma. And he would have employed how many different people back here? And so this is what they're doing. They haven't just sold the farm and given away the family silver. They're chasing away everyone competent on the staff out as well. Every single year that the cancer has been in power has added approximately 1 million more unemployed. So since 1994, we've had, I think today unemployment is well in excess of 20 million. And officially, according to billboards that I've seen in KwaZulu, the ANC boasts that they've got 20 million people on welfare today. Now, and they even boast that in 1994, only 400,000 were on welfare. Now there's 20 million. And that's meant to be good. I would have thought that's a bad thing.
Nothing to be proud of.
I would have thought something to be ashamed of. Yes, exactly. Now that's approximately 10 times the income taxpayer base for the country. We don't have 2 million taxpayers on income taxpayers in this country. South Africa's been looted with a 1.3 trillion rand budget, which is primarily a feeding trough for the political elite to enrich themselves at the expense of the general population. And these are just some government things, which is, I think, mostly whitewashed, because the corruption is far greater than what they're reporting. But even they report billions lost, hundreds of billions lost. And this is their statistics. I mean, this is Human Sciences Research Council, SASA. People working in police service are considered 66% corrupt. Home Affairs officials, only 38%. Well, I would have thought more like 83%. But anyway, this is what they say. Politicians at the national level, 37% corrupt. Only. You know, you can see this is propaganda. It's obviously worse than this. But this is what they're admitting to. I mean, this is shocking. 1% is too many. And so basically, they've got their snout in a trough. Do you remember Nelson Mandela saying he's going to stop the gravy train? I think he stopped it just enough time to get on board and hook up all the carriages for his pals, and the gravy train is going at a much greater rate. And so it's not surprising that they speak about having their snouts in the trough. Corruption is killing us. In fact, corruption is stealing more from this country. Do you know, according to the African Union, we have 1/4 of the entire gross domestic product of the continent of Africa is stolen by governments every year. That is, by the way, 10 times more than all of foreign aid combined. So who needs foreign aid if you could just get rid of corruption? If you could get rid of 10% of corruption, it would be worth more than all the foreign aid. If you could get rid of half of it, wow, it'd be like 5 times the foreign aid. Get rid of all of it, 10 times as much as what the foreign aid's worth. And so when someone like Zuma says, corruption doesn't hurt anyone, it hurts everyone. Governments create wealth the same way ticks create blood. I'd once come back from the shooting range on a farm, and my young son Calvin had been with me, and I got a phone call from my wife, and I had to hold the phone away from me because she was screaming near the end, because apparently he had a tick on him. So I had to rush home immediately, and there were my girls, all horrified, and my wife, who's brought up in Austria, who is allergic to crawly things with multiple feet, and they were, you know, how do you get this tick off? So I said, well, it's quite simple. You just apply Vaseline. I applied some petroleum jelly Vaseline, and then you saw the tick literally climb out of his back. And once he's off, picked him up, put him on the counter, and the tick started to run along the counter. My girl screamed, I hit it, blood splat everywhere, more screams. Then my daughter Danielle says, whose blood is that? Calvin's. Even more screams. You only get an opportunity like this once in a while, and so you've got to use this as a teaching opportunity. I said, this tick is like our government. It produces nothing except in disease and infection, and it lives off the blood of its host. In fact, polyticks, many ticks, blood-sucking parasites. Politics, many blood-sucking parasites. And they live off, and the thing is, I've got to apologize to the ticks, because the ticks, when they've got enough, they drop off. But the banksters and the politicians never drop off. They just keep leeching. And, you know, you might survive one tick with you, and let me tell you, tick bite fever is no fun. I mean, I've had it on the border, and it was so bad. I remember going to the medic and saying, you know, I've got this headache and fever and this, that, and the other. Oh, and by the way, I've got this sort of golf ball type thing on the top of my leg, and he, oh, tick bite. And typical army medic, whipped out a scalpel, squeezed out the pus, and I just about passed out, but boy, did I feel better almost immediately. It was extraordinary. Just removing that tick and getting rid of the pus that he'd caused, and I almost felt recovered within half an hour. It was just amazing. And our economy in the Cape will get better so fast when you get these ticks off us, because it's not like we got one, which is bad enough. One tick is bad. We got hundreds of thousands of them. And it used to be enough to have one first lady. Now they've got who knows how many. I don't even think the president knows how many first ladies he's got. And yes, well, some Communist Party, sigh. And even Desmond Tutu says that this government is worse than apartheid, which is obvious to us, but impressive when he can say it. And Malema has even said it was better under apartheid. Not that he would know, because he wasn't exactly alive much under it, but anyway, considering we voted to abolish it in 1983, what would Julius Malema know about it? But anyway, I think even a stopped clock can be right twice a day. Failed ideas from the 19th century are called progressive today. Doesn't matter what they call it, it's still the same old Marxist nonsense. And the witch doctor isn't going to make it work any better. I think this is the new Minister of Technology. I don't know, it's hard to keep up these days. So what are people's concerns today? It's clear that most citizens are deeply concerned about the rampant crime and the horrifying violence, which has escalated throughout the country. And this sort of scene does not encourage investors for some strange reason, and it even discourages tourists, would you believe? And burning of universities just doesn't seem to help education. And this in downtown Cape Town. I mean, just have a look here. A parent concerned for his kid, and these people smashing windows. I mean, even police cars. No fear for the police. No respect for the police. This is right outside Parliament, throwing rocks. And the police coming along with rubber bullets, which doesn't seem to stop these characters much from doing all kinds of damage and destruction. This sort of thing, do you remember what people were saying back in the 80s? Just abolish apartheid, just hand over to ANC and so on, and there'll be no more violence, no more crime, no more stayaways, no more boycotts. It'll all just be wonderful, won't it? And there were some of us who believed that, actually. And now they're talking about democratize higher education now. I don't know how they can even call it higher education, because really and truly, if these people are university students, then really I think, yes, I want everything free now, I'll burn everything. Can you reason with a person like this? Would you want to employ a person like this? And what's going on at our universities? And there is no end of destruction. Yes, there's no better way of improving transport than by burning buses and burning cities. And I mean, gee, who wouldn't want to be part of a country that's got this sort of thing going on in the capital city? That's up in Pretoria. This is going on while I was on a mission up there in June last year, and oh my, all the roads burning, destruction. Can you imagine? If you wanted to know why things cost so much in our shops, well, when they're having how many of their trucks burnt out on the freeway and how many of their shops looted regularly, think of the extra cost of insurance, security, repaying it. This gets added to the price tag of everything you pay. The first time I went to London, I was impressed at how many pounds I got for my rand, because the rand was more powerful than the pound. And when I went to America, I was very happy because my rand was so much stronger than dollar. I was getting about $2 for every rand, and it was nice. My first major overseas mission, which was 2.5 months in the 80s, and I went across America, Germany, and Britain, and it cost me 1,000 rand. That's the airfares, transport, trains, buses, everything. 1,000 rand. And today? Well, of course, having people like this around, burning, destroying, looting. If you wondered why we've got a problem in this country, why there's unemployment and why there's problems, and why investors don't have much confidence in this country, look no further than your whatever. And do you know that they call these protests? Now, I know what a protest is. We do protests, and we don't even leave litter behind. We don't break anything. But when a person's destroying things, they're no longer a protester, they're a rioter. They're vandals. And what does looting shoe shops have to do with all of that? Is this democracy? And just in 2015, Rhodes Must Fall demonstrators destroyed 300 million rands worth of damage on university campuses alone, not counting elsewhere, and that was according to our Marxist Minister of Higher Education, Blade Nzimani. So 300 million just from Rhodes Must Fall. It started with them allowing him to take down a statue, and it ended with him destroying who knows how much. And that was just 2015. 2016 was a whole other ball game. This is one of the most beautiful city halls in the whole of Africa, in what was, in Bloemfontein. Burned out by some trade union protesting against something, who knows what. And Hout Bay, which used to be one of the premier places to go in Cape Town, and today Hout Bay has been held hostage by terrorists, burning their own facilities that's been given to them, and the people who've been hosting them so generously. In fact, the Hout Bay people have been some of the most liberal people around, who work tirelessly to bring down the old regime and bring in the new, and this is the thanks they get. And yes, why wouldn't you want people who do this to your car living next to you? So we've got a culture of violence in South Africa. By the way, I don't think these ANC people are carrying those bricks to build something. I've just got this suspicion.
They've never built anything.
They're not bricklayers.
I don't think so, no. So, yes, culture, enrichment, and diversity. And wouldn't you want this kind of government here? I mean, this is what goes on up in Nigeria. Yes, we understand that that's how governments protect their population. And so if you think that this is a good idea, to have a government that can just have the power to kill people so contemptuously without any due process. Over 500,000 South Africans, that's 500,000 South Africans have been murdered since 1994. That's officially 500,000. That's not counting the 1.4 million babies killed through abortion. South Africa suffers from one of the highest rape rates in the world. It's absolutely staggering. Taryn, would you have the stats? I mean, it's mind-boggling what they're telling us. And
nobody reports rape anymore.
Yes,
so
but RapeCan has got some stats that they've worked out. But it's so staggering. They say, am I quoting the statistic correctly, that a girl has more chance of being raped than learning to read in South Africa. That's one of the stats, which is just so staggering. Almost everybody is deeply concerned for the safety of their family and particularly their children. And this is key for us to understand. Many people are saying, we've had enough. Well, I would have thought they would have had enough a long time ago. But this kind of violence, we are the future. That's a good reason to abandon the sinking ship, if they're the future. Fees must fall or shut down the country. Well, there's no such thing as a free lunch. Somebody's got to pay for it. There's no such thing as free education. Now, when I was studying at theological college, nobody put me through it. I mean, I was brought up as in white privilege under apartheid, they say. So my white privilege was getting conscripted to the army in 1979 for 2 years and going and risking our lives to save Avembos while we've been called racist up in the border. And then when I went to college, well, I was too male and too pale even in the early 1980s to get any kind of scholarship. And so while black and coloured students were studying for free at college, I was working 6 days a week, 8 hours a night at the fire brigade to put myself through. That was my white privilege. I didn't get any breaks. I worked and put myself through. And I didn't resent it, and I thought, what's wrong with that? Because, in fact, I managed to come out of college with not only more skills and having had the opportunity to break windows and locks and doors legally in firefighting, but it was a good experience. And I paid for education. I came out without any college debt, which I thought was an excellent thing. And these people are thinking now that higher education is their right. Why? Why would it be? In fact, considering the fact that something like 85% of our students fail, means 85% of the people in the university shouldn't even be there, because especially when you realize that the pass rate is so criminally low as to be laughably, pathetically shameful excuse. Every year, most of the graduates from university, even the ones who graduate, haven't got a hope of getting a job because I don't know who'd want to employ them outside of the government. UCT will pay. No, they don't. Taxpayers pay. And so why would, really and truly, are any of these people employable? Would any business in their right mind want to employ people who are going to do this to the places that are giving them as free an education? And what's looting got to do with education anyway? And this is the kind of nonsense going on at our universities and our campuses. This is UCT, Cape Town. We used to call it, and of course, I think this now is University of the North, Northwest University, what used to be Potchefstroom University. They had about 150 million rand damage. And then there was University of Durban Westphal. They had their library burnout, and the Chancellor of the university said he's glad that not much damage was done. This is not much damage, by the way. Now, when I was at the fire brigade, we'd consider this a complete and utter total disaster, but the Chancellor reckoned burning out the library was not much of a problem. At least no serious damage was done. Just 150 million rand of the taxpayers' money. So, congratulations, fees have fallen, you can now study here for free. And yes, this is really going to help our education. Because, as you know, burning on, this is, by the way, a war memorial. I won't show what's on the other side. That was a major feminist leader, but it doesn't seem they seem to know the history of who they're attacking. But why would you not want these people dancing on your tables and ripping irreplaceable, original, oil on canvas art and burning them? So we've got to respect their culture, but they're not interested in respecting ours, and they want to destroy it. And this on our university campuses. And where's the police? Where's the campus security? What are they doing? This is unbelievable. And this kind of chaos went on for how many months? And how did this start? By giving in to students demanding that the founder of the university, whose money has paid for this whole university, Cecil John Rhodes, that his statue's got to be removed. Well, if you can move one statue by mob violence, well, next thing is, well, it's just going to escalate. So if you give them an inch, they will take a mile. You give them your finger, they will take your whole arm, probably your whole body. And this creep says abolish science and then opens up an iPad. Does she have any understanding what science is? This, by the way, is the face of the Minister of Higher Education in our country, who just so happens to also be the General Secretary of the Southern Communist Party. And you wonder why the quality of our education is deteriorating and sometimes seems indistinguishable from indoctrination. Now, this is an American picture, but really and truly, I don't know why anybody would ever put their child on the government bus to get indoctrination. It's a gulag. Societies are far gone in depravity when toleration is considered a good in itself without regard to the thing tolerated. When we were in the fire brigade, we were not taught to tolerate fire hazards. And policemen shouldn't tolerate crime. And politicians shouldn't tolerate corruption. And doctors shouldn't tolerate disease and infections. Since when is tolerating things that are going to totally destroy a society a good thing? Why on earth are we tolerating that which is going to destroy a society? Now, the disgusting, deteriorating standard of government education has led to a major growth industry of the independent schools and private schools, Christian schools, and homeschooling. And all of this is a massive vote of no confidence in the government schooling system. And so, when the government can't even spell school, then, why would we want to send our children to be indoctrinated by them? And we try and do a lot of work in the schools, and it's extraordinary how little facility some schools have. But there's such a eagerness for education. I think education is the key, and yet the vast majority of the university graduates will not be able to be employed anywhere. That's a fact. Well, because the government's economic policy are guaranteeing that they're chasing away the investors and the jobs and the tourists. Now we've even got Bible colleges like this being bullied and extorted by the government to get accreditation. I mean, accreditation, this is a mission Bible school that gives free education to people coming from all over the continent, And so this Back to the Bible training course has been going for 26 years, I think. And Dr. Mulder and his wife, who when they retired at age 60, they went back to college. They earned their bachelor's, master's, and doctorates in theology. I mean, at age 60, went back to university. Can you imagine? Nobody gave it to them free, by the way. And then they're giving free education to people from 14 or 20 countries sometimes, and they might have over 100 students at any one time, and they're giving it to them free. Now, the government comes and needs to accredit them. Why? It's a mission. It's none of their business. And yet, what they're called is a Sakwa or a Malusi Trust or who knows what. There's so many of these blasted things, and they come along, and you've got to pay them tens of thousands of rands for them to evaluate. And who's in charge of this accrediting agency to accredit Bible colleges and Christian high institute of learning institutions? It's a Hindu woman. And this Hindu woman boasted in a public meeting, in the last 5 years, we've had 1,000 applications, and we've only accepted 2. And she was proud of that. And each of those 1,000 had to pay hundreds of thousands of rands to get refused. Can we just understand what nonsense this is? Of course, most people are deeply concerned for the economy, the lack of jobs, unemployment, inflation, and the deteriorating buying power of the rand. Economist Stephen Mitford Goodson, who was once a director of the Southern Reserve Bank, has stated that the buying power of the rand has deteriorated to 1/500th of its buying power in 1982. You could buy more with 1 rand in 1982 than you could buy with 500 rand today. In other words, 1 rand in 1982 could buy more than 500 rand can today. And they call that progress. Where does a currency come from? It is created effortlessly out of thin air as loans, mostly on computers, blips on a computer screen. By who? Central banks, which are frauds. I mean, the South African Reserve Bank, it's not South African, they have no reserves, and it's not a bank. It's a fraud. And what they have done is they create currency out of thin air, but we've got to work for the rest of our lives to pay off the seemingly endless amounts of interest on it. Why? Now, here's this government that has no end of corruption, service delivery failure, Ishcom's power failure, blackouts, in power of darkness, I think you call Ishcom now, in Kindler, all kinds of corruptions. But it's all the fault of Jan van Riebeck's statue and this poor horse statue out there in PE, and of course Queen Victoria, and don't forget Jan van Riebeck and Cecil Rhodes, and if we could just get rid of the Paul Kruger statue. So all these imbeciles who think that getting rid of statues is going to somehow improve the economic chaos that the corrupt criminals running this gulag have started. I mean, how stupid can you be? Well, apparently they can. Vandalism, arson, destroying university campus buildings, vehicles, buses and trains can only aggravate the situation. How's that going to bring down costs? And it's driving away investors and it's devaluing the rand. Even more than that, it drives away the employers and it erodes investor confidence. The massive erosion of pensions, savings and earnings, particularly over the last 2 decades, has been catastrophic. And deforestation, the destruction of so much of our environment, including laying waste of entire forests. We used to have forests all around the Cape. This government has destroyed millions of trees just in the Cape Peninsula alone. And who knows how many tens of millions of trees in other parts of this country. The deforestation obviously has had an impact on the drought. Why is it that the Cape is having less and less rain? Well, we've chopped down millions of trees in our water catchment areas. Surely that has an impact. But we've got a government that seems to hate trees. They say they're alien trees. Well, they're an alien government. And in fact, I don't think the Cause are indigenous to the Western Cape either. So, you know, if they say you've got to get rid of trees that aren't indigenous here, well, they're not indigenous and socialism isn't indigenous. Let's get rid of that too. But 80% of the wood collected in South Africa is used as fuel for cooking. Now, how wasteful is that? We've got nuclear power station in Cape Town. We've got all kinds of technology, and they're wasting 80% of the wood in this country has been wasted for cooking.
Why?
And then we've got massive arson, which was inspired by the ANC's 103rd anniversary event, which they held in the Greenpoint Stadium, and we were there when the president himself was calling on the people to make the Cape ungovernable. and the fire started. We had 6,000 hectares of forestry conservation area burned in the 2 months following that speech at the Greenpoint Stadium, celebrating the 103rd anniversary of the founding of this abortion, nepotism, and communism party. The destruction of so much of our environment, this does not help. And how many animals died? How much destruction was done to the essential vegetation needed for how many animals? And the destruction, the hard work that people had to go through, and of course we lost firemen in fighting these things, people died in this. And in Knysna this year, now we had fires deliberately started in December, was it last year? And they saw what they called young kids, probably 18, 20-year-old kids, burning down parts of the forest. And now we've got this which they are trying to assure us was not done by arson. And yet the fire brigade was telling us they were dealing with 50 separate fires simultaneously. How does that happen accidentally by a lightning bolt, which hasn't happened in centuries before, but somehow it all happened right now, when the ANC is calling for making a place ungovernable. And when this fire was on the go, devastating fire in Knysna, the worst fires I've ever had, the president was asked at a public meeting, what's he going to do to help them? And he said, nothing. Why should I? They all voted DA. Well, that's good to know that he doesn't consider them part of his country, so why should they stay in a country where the president and the ruling party regard them as not even their people to help in time of need? I mean, if some ANC supporting character has a shack burned down in a township, most Cape Townians help them, even though they know that these people probably were stealing from them, demonstrating against them, rioting, burning, and voting for people who want to kill us all. And yet we still help our neighbours when they're in need.
Like in Houtbaai.
Hmm?
Like in Houtbaai.
Yes, like in Hout Bay. I mean, that's a classic example. Quite aside from arson, you've got widespread litter and the destructive pollution, which are all major threats to the environment. Now, this is a picture from Harare, just to give you scenes from your next attraction, from how the service delivery can really improve under a Marxist type of government like the ANC aspire to be. And this, sadly, is what's going on in our peninsula. This is rubbish, literally. And this is now up in Johannesburg, where the streets used to be paved with gold, and you can see what an ANC-run community can look like. I mean, why wouldn't you want them all to move into the Cape? And by the way, this is now a picture from Harare, where we work in Zimbabwe, showing you what happens when there's heavy rainfall in a place which has had so much litter. Because what happens is all that plastic gets stuck in the drainage systems, and then the nice drainage systems that the evil colonials built now can't cope with draining off the water, and now you've suddenly got the people, oh my, you know, who would have guessed? But you throw millions and millions of plastic things around, and soon you've got floods. Who would have guessed? There's cause and effect out there. Now, do you know how much foreigners pay to come to our yacht bays and so on? And yet you've got people who are litter like this. You think of all the damage this does, the hundreds of millions of tons of plastic litter in our oceans. It's strangling our wildlife, our sea life. It's criminal. And this is disgusting. And what's this going to say to tourists? Why would tourists want to come to our beaches? And then you have somebody commenting about those who behaved like baboons on the beaches, and that person gets heavily prosecuted, because how can you suggest that? I don't think that she's saying that the people were baboons, saying that they were acting like, in the terms of destructiveness. In other words, if you're dealing with the issue, not the people. But somehow or another you can say all sorts of things against white people, including kill them all, and that's just fine. In fact, it's artistic. Now, all of this massively impacts on our country, because tourists don't come because they want to see more litter and somebody burning things down. They come because they want an attractive tourist destination. So if you litter, pollute and deforest, you're chasing away jobs, tourists, and the economy suffers, and the viability of our country is undermined. This is an immense impact. Just think of our hotels, that people aren't going to come to these hotels if our forests are burned down, our beaches are polluted, and the guests are likely to get mugged on the way back in the middle of a power failure. We've got some nice beaches, but they won't stay that way unless we stop the pollution. Now, just a few scenes from our past attractions. This is Durban Beach, which used to be a premier tourist destination. People came, this is of course in the evil days of apartheid, when everything was so much worse, before people were freed. And so, just to give you an idea of how it was before we got liberated, and this is what Durban Beachfront looked like then, and that's what it looks like now. And you think, wow, well, I'm sure every tourist in the world would want to move to Durban to experience that. Now, in addition, there's other serious concerns for the erosion of free speech, freedom of conscience, and religious freedom, which is under attack by this government at this moment. The CRL Commission proposes to require all religious practitioners to register and be regulated by the state. Now, you know what it's like when you've got to get a driver's license from the state. Fail, 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 come again, read it. No, you've got to do your eye test again. But I did it last week. No, but you've got to do it again. And so on. Just why? Why would we continually have these requirements that you've got to do it again and again and again? Back in the queue, but I was just here. No, we've got to get back to the queue. And everything is designed to waste your time. So if you're going to do that on registering for your car and registering for your license, what do you think's going to happen when you've got to register your church? Same thing. And they've been turning down Bible colleges, mission training colleges like Africa School of Missions. Nope, not accepted. And then they've got to start again. No, you can't operate for 5 years. You can only apply again in 5 years' time. Why? Who suddenly came up with this? And if they do that for the registering colleges, what makes you think they'll do it any more efficiently or with thoughtfulness and helpfulness when it comes to registering a church or a religious practitioner? And what is a religious practitioner? It's just a pastor, it's a missionary, an evangelist, Sunday school teacher. What about a song leader, a drummer in the church band, organ player? If you post a religious meme occasionally, I mean, could you consider a religious practitioner if you made a Facebook post and it could be considered religious? Now, where does this end? Despite widespread opposition and the legal evaluation that this legislation was unnecessary, unworkable, and unconstitutional, they're going ahead. And then there's the hate speech bill being promoted by the so-called Ministry of Justice, which pose a massive threat to freedom of speech, freedom of conscience, and freedom of association. When I spoke with this Minister of Justice and asked him about why they are doing this, he said, because of the wars of religion. I said, well, the wars of religion ended in 1648 with the Peace of Westphalia. And in fact, in this 20th century that we just have come out of, secular governments like yours have killed something in the region of 180 million people. Not in war, in peace. Not foreign citizens, their own citizens. 180 million citizens killed in the 20th century by secular states, as documented by the Black Book of Communism, Death by Government, and Gunnar Archipelago, and gave a few other sources. And I mean, how outrageous to have a secular government dare to talk about wars of religion, which ended 350 years ago, when they are the biggest killers and the biggest threat to peace today. Now, not all hate speech needs to be prosecuted. I mean, we know that some people need spelling help, and he probably didn't do phonics, but do we need to ban people even for making stupid, hateful, dumb comments like this?
Jews. Okay.
Yeah, no, I don't think he's against
couldn't
orange
figure
juice. Yeah, no, I don't think it's serious orange juice that he's after, but
It must be non-halal juice or something.
orange juice, yes. I mean, not all hate speech is equal, but freedom of the. But don't worry, I don't think the government was planning to go after this guy, because saying you've got to behead people, so on, that's not hate speech. But quoting what some hate speech person's saying, that's hate speech. You're not meant to expose it. Freedom of the press is threatened, other foundational freedoms which should be non-negotiable in any free country. A free country needs freedom of speech. Hate speech is just censorship of free speech that somebody doesn't like. There's no such thing as hate speech. There's no such thing as a hate crime. I mean, there's crimes. Did you kill the person or didn't you? I mean, did you break the law? Did you steal or didn't you? But to say something's a hate crime or a hate speech, well, that's just subjective. That's nonsense. It's not in the Ten Commandments. It's not in the Bible, and it shouldn't be in any constitution. It's none of any government's business to be determining what the motive of someone was. God didn't ask Adam, why did you do it? He asked, what did you do? I mean, the important thing is, did you break the law or didn't you? Not why is irrelevant. If you're saying, my mommy dropped my dummy when I was small, I suffered irreparable psychological damage. Who cares why you did it? The important thing is what you did. That's the only thing that matters. So what is wrong with our country? In short, corrupt, greedy, incompetent politicians. Unworkable and uncountable centralization. Black economic empowerment, affirmative action. Racist job reservations. Racial quotas in sports, for goodness sakes. Guilt manipulation. The politics of guilt and pity. In a word, socialism. Welfare junkies are a curse. Inflation. Chasing away job creators, investors and tourists. We have a police force that is soft on crime.
Hey, soft.
Tough, tolerant of corruption. And they're sleeping on the job. This was taken by criminals who robbed a police station and they posted the pictures of the entire police force at the station asleep on social media. We have no municipal rights. Ratepayers and homeowners do not have a say in how parasites, welfare junkies, panhandlers and thieves who outnumber them can say how to loot their economy and destroy their municipality that they've built up over generations. That is the foundation of any civilization, is that homeowners and ratepayers control the municipality. This country is being looted by professional politicians, parasites and thieves. Crime, violence, murder. Since when do you need to have a... I mean, if they know this is a hijacking hotspot, why don't they do something about it? Like, put a police vehicle there or something. But honestly, hijacking hotspot and you've got a road sign for this? And genocidal hatred tolerated and promoted by politicians. Now, just to remind you, historically, this has a precedent. In the 1930s, the looting of farms and the murder of farmers in the Soviet Union was called dekulakization. In Zimbabwe, they call it land reform. Same thing. This is land reform. As you can see, a lot of farming is taking place by burning down everything. Racial discrimination and cancer-ruled South Africa is called black economic empowerment, or affirmative action. Pick any card, it just happens to be there's only race cards to pick. Oh, by the way, only whites can be racist and no blacks can be racist. The Southern Communist Party and COSATU are running the ANC into the ground. And then you've got the BLF's white-owned bold land grab, and they were the ones posting happy responses to the fires in Meisner. Imagine. I mean, which white would dream of posting something happy if some township was burning? It's just, how sick is that? And University of Cape Town, 2016, they could have somebody sitting in their cafeteria with kill all whites. I mean, imagine something else with another race group on there. You know, would that have been acceptable? And in front of a police van, you can have people walking around with a placard saying kill all whites. My daughter's been up at UCT at ballroom dancing and seen him wearing a t-shirt like this and said, really? And she said he'd respond like he hated me. I said, he does. I said, but he did seem rational. I tried to reason with him. I said, you can't. I said, he seemed demon-possessed. I said, well, I'm sure he was, yeah. I mean, there's a lot of anger out there. And this isn't just that we feel like somebody's hurting our feelings. They've murdered 85,000 whites in this country since 1994. And that's included something between 3,000 to 4,000 farmers and their family members. That is absolutely staggering. I mean, imagine the horror that went through the British Empire because of 37 white farmers who were killed in the Mau Mau uprising in Kenya in the 1950s to 60s. 37. And the British Empire was shocked. How could they do this? Rhodesia, I think we lost something like 650 white people killed in the terrorist fighting through the 15-year war we were involved in Rhodesia. We lose more than that over here in any given year. This young Afrikaans girl in Stellenbosch University murdered and raped by thugs who obviously subscribe to this kill all whites mentality. This is not just our feelings getting hurt. This is what is being done in our country. And it turns out that the most racist people are the ones crying racist all the time. In addition, these riots and irresponsible threats of white genocide and kill the Boer, kill the farmer songs are only driving down the value of the rand, the national currency, and further impoverishing the entire population, stealing from everyone. And can they not see this? They're chasing away their own job prospects. That's like they're cutting their own throat, killing the goose that lays the golden egg. And while they're about, they're shooting themselves in the foot, the knee, and the groin. I mean, do they not understand they're completely destroying any hope for the future for themselves? I went to one of these dumb things last year where the Ministry of Justice was hosting some white privilege conference. I mean, you've got to be kidding. What white privilege? The white privilege I had was to get caned at school, conscripted to the army, work my way through the night to put myself through theological college, and get hated at and have stones and rocks thrown at me just for the colour of my skin. Now, I mean, what white privilege? I don't think we had any white privilege. I think we had extra duties, more like white man's burden. But how convenient to blame a race group. Now, I think if whites want to blame all their problems on any race group, don't have a cop-out. I mean, take responsibility for what we can do and what can I do about it. But it seems a whole lot of other people are very happy to blame just whites. Isn't that very convenient? I think it was the Times of London that coined the term ineptocracy, a system of government where the least capable to lead are elected by the least capable of producing, and where the members of society least likely to sustain themselves or succeed are rewarded with goods and services paid for by the confiscated wealth of a diminishing number of producers. That is an ineptocracy. Does any government in the world sort of come to your mind when you sort of think about that might possibly, where this could apply? Tolerance of intolerance is cowardice. And I'm sorry to say, we have got a lot of spineless, yellow-bellied cowards in this country who are not willing to call a spade, name what's got to be named, corrupt, lying thieves in government, and cowards unwilling to even protect their own family members. So, key question, is there any hope for our country? Plainly, what is desperately and urgently needed are leaders who can, with a clear, bold vision and with fresh ideas, workable plans of action which can resonate with voters. We need that. It should go without saying that these leaders would need to be people of integrity and courage. Every crisis includes both a danger and opportunity, and at this moment the ANC is divided. It's disgraced, it's in disarray, they're even fighting one another. Love it when the enemies fight one another. And the leadership of the DA, or should we say the DANC, is doing more than shooting itself in the foot by backstabbing Helen Zille, the very liberal, once Black Sash Premier of the Cape. They're cutting their own throat. Along with massive unemployment, outrageous levels of crime and violence, rampant inflation, riots and general failure of the government on all levels, just most recently seen in Hout Bay. All of this has created widespread dissatisfaction, dismay and disillusionment. I mean, should I say that the wheels are coming off this government? Now, the rise of nationalism worldwide, as evidenced by the stunning Brexit vote of Great Britain last year, and I must say that surprised me. I did not know that the British had a majority of voters who still had backbone or intelligence, because the government, the BBC, and the entire media was just bombarding them with, there's only one opportunity, that's to stay in the EU. You cannot even think of Brexit. I mean, and they just slandered anybody who ever dared of it. To think that the British still had enough in them to just go against the entire tidal wave of disinformation. Impressive. And whoever drew this cartoon up really understands what's going on. You know, you've got Greece is sick, you got the dead pulling down, you've got the Muslims sawing things off. You've got, we need more immigration from Merkel. Sweden being forced to walk the plank into political correctness. And here we've got this democracy? What is that written there? That's they're pounding into and the globalists are trying to fire at them, and the waves of immigration, economic failure coming. It's regulations strangling the poor people up in red tape. Yep, now somebody's put this in, above the EU flag is?
Yeah.
I mean, why did the British vote for Brexit? Well, in a nutshell, the EU is going in the wrong direction. And one person put this, we are not one race, we are not one global nation, we are not one global religion, we are not one liberal moral code, we are not one gender, we are not one government, We're not globalists. We're not one. We're individuals. We're sovereign nations. We're exiting a system. Hear us loud and clear. You have been warned. Brexit. A triumph for the simple idea that Britain should be governed by the British people. Now, the Cape has been around longer than any other section of this country. Should we not be ruling ourselves? The British line has roared for a change, which is quite refreshing. And then there's the Trump revolution in the United States, which very few people saw coming. I mean, it really took a lot of people by surprise. On the morning after the vote, what was the headlines and all the posters of the Cape Times? You know, Hillary wins, and the front page of the Cape Times. It had Hillary, with a big crowd, and by the time the papers were hitting the streets, they already knew she had lost. I mean, just typically, you can't trust your newspaper.
And he's still alive.
Yes. And then the doubling of the votes of Marine Le Pen's National Front. Oh, I really thought the French would vote this time. But the fact is, every time she goes to the polls, she doubles the votes. I mean, sure, we'd like France to get a life and a brain quicker. But, of course, I'm sure there are a lot of illegals voting and there's a lot of fraud. So maybe there's a bit more hope for France than first meets the eye. And Marine Le Pen's niece, Marianne Le Pen, is even more conservative, Christian and pro-life than her aunt. And I see a lot of hope for the National Front in the future. Then there's the dramatic growth of the Freedom Party in Austria. The steady growth of parties resisting the European Union and other globalist movements all indicate a dramatic increase of support for those rejecting politics as usual and globalization. In fact, the Freedom Party has every chance of winning the parliamentary elections this year. Now, they came in a hairbreadth of winning the presidential election last year. And it's only postal votes that carried over, and even their Supreme Court said these postal votes are fraudulent, do it again. But I think the second time around, they made sure that they swamped the vote with even more fraud. So that was sad, but it showed that at least half of Austria, in fact, this is the map. The blue are the ones supporting Hofer of the Freedom Party, and the yellow are where they were voting, which is Vienna and Linz, basically.
Sure.
Two big urban centres. So Austria as a whole is anti-EU. But where they've got the most foreigners and Muslims, well, that's where you've got the problem in the welfare junkies, as always. Hungary, very impressive what's going on in Hungary, very impressive. So you've got possible of Brexit
Check
and
out.
the Portugal and Italy and check out and Austria and finish and Slovakia and Latvia and Belgium. So this is the European Union's Tower of Babel, built like the Tower of Babel, even with the incomplete scaffolding style of the picture. This, a lot of people want to get out. A message you're seeing throughout the whole of Europe is decentralize everything. Centralization is a complete and total and utter failure. Time has passed like last century. If you surrender a civilization to avoid social disapproval, you should know that all of history will curse you for your cowardliness. And that is something we've got to take seriously in the Cape. We've got a lot of people cowardly because, but if we go for this, somebody might misinterpret and they might think that we're being racist.
No,
You know, I mean, really, get alive and get lost. Because the key question is secession of the Cape viable? This is a big question. Well, some of the most successful countries in the world are products of secession. Let's just take, for example, my all-time favorite, Switzerland. They seceded from Austria in 1291, and they've actually done a very good job since then. Very decentralized, canton system. The United States of America seceded from Great Britain in 1776. I mean, many people forget the fact that they did secede. In fact, the US Constitution provides for secession, and Lincoln was completely wrong to wage war against the South, who exercised their democratic constitutional right to secession. The United States of America was the term all the way through till the end of the Civil War. And after that, they called the United States of America is.
These United States.
Before, it was always understood it was the, and by the way, in the original Declaration of Independence, 1776, the United States, it's got a small u for United. It's the United States of America. It was, the emphasis was on the States. That was capitalized, not the United. It wasn't, and they weren't giving the feds power to be a new totalitarian system. That sadly was usurped by Lincoln later. By the way, when they declared the independence, these were the 13 colonies, from Maine through to the Carolinas and Georgia. Florida wasn't part of it, that was controlled by Spain. All of this was controlled by the French. And this was controlled by the Spanish. Very interesting that the Americans had just the eastern seaboard. The rest was controlled by the French and Spanish. Another story how that changed. The original 13 colonies are now 50. Well, you could say 51 if you count Canada. Belgium seceded from the Netherlands in 1830. Texas seceded from Mexico in 1836. You can see also how Texas has grown. I mean, this is the way it was. Texas being annexed and how it grew, how they managed to take from Mexico. By the way, at the moment, Mexico is busy taking all of those back by flooding it with their people. You know, demographics is destiny. Nicaragua seceded from Guatemala in 1838. Norway seceded from Sweden in 1905. That's not that long ago. Norway today is very different from Sweden. For example, in Sweden, homeschooling is illegal. And homeschoolers have to flee across to Norway where homeschooling is fully legal. In Sweden, almost all guns are illegal, but in Norway, almost everyone has a gun. So, you know, they're two separate countries, but there used to be one. The Republic of Ireland seceded from Great Britain in 1922. Easter Rebellion in 1916, a lot of violence, but they did secede. And Northern Ireland, the British wanted to give Northern Ireland to the Catholics as well, and the Northern Ireland fought to remain British. They actually fought against the British to keep in the Union because they didn't want to be part of Catholic Ireland. And that's an interesting setup in Ireland. So most people get confused. And again, it's important for people to understand this for the Cape too. Because you get England, you get Scotland, you get Wales, and you get Northern Ireland. That's the United Kingdom. And many people refer to, if you call a Scotsman English, he'll say, no, I'm not English, I'm Scottish. You could call him British, but you can't call him English. They understand their nationalities. They've all got their own flags and own parliaments and so on, even though they're in a union. And Scotland recently had a referendum on should Scotland secede. It was close, but they decided to stay in the union. But there was no question that they had the right to do it if they wanted to. I mean, Britain wasn't going to have a civil war over this. Those days are past. I mean, there's a lot of sentiment for secession these days. Finland seceded from Russia in 1917, and they had to fight backwards and forwards because the Russians tried to take them again in 1940, and they failed, and they tried it again in 1944, and they failed. So Finland, although it's lost a bit of territory, it's still standing firm. And one of these days, I hope they get their stolen territories back. So you've got a whole lot of Scandinavian countries. There was a time when Sweden controlled all of Finland. Finland used to be part of Sweden, by the way, before it was taken by Russia. Pakistan seceded from India in 1947. Not exactly bloodless. Sorry to say, there was a few million dead in that situation. And then there's a lot of border raids and violence between India and Pakistan. To this day, they hate one another, which is not a good example, but the fact is that the secession was accepted. And then you had Bangladesh, which was meant to be East Pakistan, which seceded from Pakistan. So Bangladesh is now independent from Pakistan itself. Singapore seceded from Malaysia in 1965. Now, bear in mind that Singapore is right there, smack in the middle of Malaysia. But that seaport has become effectively a tax haven, free port. And when our mission wants to print Bibles, we often will go to Singapore. We get our Bibles for Sudan printed in Singapore because they will print 5 Bibles for the price of 1 if it's printed in Kenya. So, although Kenya's right next door to where we want them, we get them from Singapore because Singapore produces better work, so much cheaper, efficient, and they even cover the transport to get it where you are. So, Singapore hasn't been sitting around whinging, whining, crying, and criminalizing anybody who used to be of the colonial ancestry. They've just made themselves one of the most attractive investment centers around the world. Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia seceded from Russia in 1991. And Riga in Latvia, hosted the World Choir Olympics just a few years ago when my daughter sang, represented Cape Town Youth Choir there. Stellenbosch University Choir won the event for the worldwide for the sacred music category. I mean, Latvia is now, they're just screaming it after being suppressed by the communists for decades. They now are free countries. Croatia and Slovenia broke away from Yugoslavia in 1991. In fact, they had, Croatia had a war of independence lasting from 1991 to 1995. Slovenia had a war lasting just 10 days. Bosnia, theirs last 3 years, and so on. So there's been a lot of wars there, but Yugoslavia, which was a useless product of the Versailles Treaty just to punish Austria, has broken up. My son recently visited Croatia, and this is Dubrovnik, one of these famous old walled cities from the Middle Ages. Eritrea seceded from Ethiopia in 1993. East Timor seceded from Indonesia in 2002. Now that's interesting because Indonesia, a big, strong, massive, colossal country, the largest Muslim nation on earth, by the way. But East Timor is now independent. There's thousands of islands in Indonesia, but East Timor fought for a while because they said we should not be ruled by Indonesia. South Sudan seceded from Sudan in 2011. We had a lot to do with that. South Sudan is a very, very hot spot in many ways, more ways than one, and it's still in conflict today, but the black Christian South has seceded from that Muslim Arab North, and why should they not? So, what about the Western Cape? Some people draw the map differently, but an independent Cape Republic. Well, remember the Cape has been around as a political entity and a cultural entity longer than the Zulus, who just earlier this year celebrated 200 years of the Zulu nation. We've been around over 350. Starting with Jan van Riebeeck and the Cape Dutch, and you know, a very visible reminder of our culture is the castle, which is the oldest building still in use in the Southern Hemisphere, not just in South Africa, in the Southern Hemisphere. And this is an amazing cultural treasure reminding us of the fact that we have been here for a long time and we've got every right to be here. And there was a castle and there was a parliament in the Cape before there was one house in what today they call Pretoria or Johannesburg. And we've got culture and we've got architecture and we have history. And the castle is a good reminder of that. And I like that anchor right at the side there, which is a good symbol and reminder. We've got, this is the Dolphin Pool, which Lady Anne Barnard sketched. And we have cultural events there, and the flags from the Dutch and the British, first the Batavian Republic and the British. Notice the difference between the old British flag, which was just the United Kingdom of Scotland and England, and then when they added Wales in as well. So we've got the St. George's Cross, the St. Andrew's Cross, and now the St. David's Cross as well. And then the old South African flag, and then the beach star. So when we go to the castle, we're reminded of our heritage and our culture, and we have guided tours of the castle, and there's a lot around the Cape, like here, close to Simonstown, reminding us of our heritage there. Here's a few old pictures of Cape Town, just to give you an idea. When we had an old pier, this is gone because this is now the foreshore.
That's the Huron Club.
And this was once one of the place where people went before there was a waterfront. They walked out there, and then hundreds of millions of tons of rock and sand to build the waterfront, because the beach used to go all the way up to about there.
Here's the Nasberg building.
Yeah, and when my parents went backwards and forwards to Europe, they used ships, and look what the foreshore used to look like. And it was a big thing, people leaving by ship, and I even remember that. I mean, I could have only been 5 when we came back to South Africa from a trip overseas, and this kind of, I remember all the streamers and people going wild. Okay, cable station, look at these tall trees. Look, I want you to notice how much forest we had on Lion's Head. I remember coming from Rhodesia in 1977 and hiking up and down here, and we didn't go all around. On the way down, we just ran down one way and stop at each tree and then run next to them. There were trees the whole way along. I mean, those trees are gone. Look how much forest there was from top. Look at the people sort of hanging out of the cable car. And this is what Cape Town station looked like. And we've always had our flower sellers. And do you remember when South African Airways was one of the best airlines in the world? And we had happy, friendly, efficient flight attendants. No, they were stewardesses, weren't they? This is what UCT used to look like. Can I just remind you of how much forest there was around there? Oh, and there's the statue of the founder. I was at UCT January 2015, before the Roads Must Fall started. And funny, because I had no inkling this was going to come, but as people going past, I was just there, so I asked students, do you know whose statue this is? No. I asked a lot of people, almost nobody knew whose statue it was. But 2 months later, the people couldn't study there because of the statue. I mean, just talk about a manufactured incident out of nothing. Just look at the amount of forestry here and how unbuilt up Clifton was at that stage. This is Hout Bay, okay? Hout Bay. Can you even look how much the forest goes up the sides of the mountains? And of course, we used to have people able to go all the way along the Chapman's Peak Drive without any problem because we had forests up and down. And when they got rid of all the forests, first by burning and then by deforesting, next thing you had rockfalls and had to close and had to put these ugly nets, and then they put this even more ugly container, and they started to charge you tolls. This place stood just fine when you had the forest there. Because, do you know, the roots of trees actually hold the rocks together. And when you uprooted and took away the trees, there suddenly were rockfalls. Who would have guessed there's a cause and effect like this? This is what our parliaments looked like when you could actually walk into them. And this is what it looked like downtown. Oh, and can I point out the amount of trees again up on Lion's Head? By the way, this is what opening of Parliament used to look like, and that's what the police used to look like. They wore ties, shirts and jackets, and polished brass buttons. And opening of Parliament without the tear gas and light police. And we used to have a presidential guard who actually were smart. And this was the kind of vapor trails you saw over Parliament. That was from the Silver Falcons. Now, talking about statues, we have Jan van Riebeeck and Queen Victoria. Now, you know, under Queen Victoria, a lot of Boers suffered and a lot of Boers died, including in the concentration camps. But Afrikaans people didn't attack statues of Queen Victoria and demand them to come down and so on. It's part of our history, for good and ill. It's still part of the history. And you could have statues remembering the British dead in a Boer town, and you could have Boer statues in the British town, and nobody would attack them. I mean, you know, they were killing one another just a few years before, or their grandparents were, but there was still respect for one's enemies and for their... I don't know how many Boers saw Louis Botha as a complete and utter Volksverraaier traitor, because under him they hung and shot a whole lot of Boer patriots who said, no, we don't want to be part of the First World War, and they were called the rebellion. But none of them tried to take down his statues. And interesting, when National Party took over, they didn't pull down the statue of Louis Botha. I mean, Louis Botha was, he was considered a Volksverraaier or traitor at that time. But I don't know anybody who attacked the statue or threw paintballs at it. There's a lot of South Africans who didn't agree with the British side of the Second World War, like President Milan, Prime Minister Milan, Prime Minister Straydon, Hendrik Verwoerd, but they didn't remove the statues to the British soldiers who fought in the First and Second World War. So Cape Town has always had a respect for a wide variety of cultures and traditions, and we haven't attacked one another's cultural symbols, which is quite right, that we shouldn't. And these are all parts of the Cape, at least at the moment they are. But of course, if you get these characters out, they want to destroy all of that. Our country once was the superpower of Africa. It's just extraordinary. After winning the war, we initiated peace. And by the way, you notice our old beautiful crest. Notice the Cape, top left, because the Cape is the mother province and it's the mother city, and we've got the anchor. I like the anchor being part of our flag. The wildebeest symbolizes the Transvaal, the wagon, no, the wildebeest symbolizes
Natal.
Natal. The Transvaal has the Ozawa, an orange free state, the orange trees, and in unity is strength, Springbok and Eland. Is that the Eland? No? Kempsbok. Springbok and Kempsbok and the lion. It's regal. It looks a lot better than the knobkerrie and the vulture. So, what policies could enable Cape independence to succeed? The basic building block of any successful society is the municipality. It's absolutely essential that the municipal control is handed back to the ratepayers and the homeowners. Decentralization is absolutely vital. Remember, democracy is the system that picks Barabbas over Jesus. Democracy is not necessarily intelligent, and the pagan Greek democracy gave no votes to women or to slaves. In fact, it was a very small percentage of the population had the vote, and of course they had not only slavery and child abuse and a whole lot of other terrible things. But why would we want to follow a pagan Greek system? The Reformation and Switzerland so on chose the rule of law, which is very different from just 50% plus one decides, well, let's loot everyone else's property. No, it doesn't work like that. Uni-cities are expensive, catastrophic failures. If I'm to identify one thing that's the worst thing that Nelson Mandela did, it's the uni-city. This ugly monstrosity, there's nothing to compare with the beautiful architecture of the Cape Town City Hall. And this, why on earth would you need a city council that big? And they're not even all fitted in there. This is it's not just ugly art and architecture, it's totally over city. This city works for you. You have got to be kidding. If any of you have had to go down there, wrong floor, wrong queue, wrong form, come back later, closed, and so on and so forth. And I mean, really, it used to be when Parow, Belleville, Rondebosch, other things, everything was efficient. You knew the town councillor, you knew the mayor, you could pop down, you could chat in the church. I mean, you knew these people. Bishop worked well. I mean, everything worked well because it was decentralized. Now you've got to go down to this colossal chaos, pay for the parking, find the right floor, be chased around, find it's the wrong place, and then you're with somebody who doesn't know and doesn't care.
Yeah.
Come back next week. Cape independence can succeed if we follow the decentralized confederation model of Switzerland and the free enterprise models of Singapore and Hong Kong. Those are success stories that have worked in the laboratory of life. In order to attract investors, the Cape would need to slash taxes, preferably abolish them altogether, because a nation trying to tax itself into prosperity is like a snake trying to eat itself. I mean, it's that stupid. By Cape Town becoming a tax haven, it can attract many investors, employers and tourists, so many that literally hundreds of thousands of jobs would be created, ultimately millions. What made Hong Kong successful? No taxes. Just Hong Kong had a bigger economy than the whole of Red China by 1997. How? They had no natural resources. It's a miniature little place. No taxes. Total freedom. It's an absolute example of, and Singapore, of course, too. When you have a mega tax haven, you attract business, you reward creativity, innovation. Free enterprise provides incentive by rewarding initiative, ingenuity, and hard work. And that's what we need. And we've got what it needs. The Cape has all the ingenuity you need. If you just untie the red tape, or cut it rather, and let the people loose. Now, it would be essential to restore respect for life and property. And the quickest way to do this would be to decentralize the police force down to the local level. National police force is a catastrophic, corrupt failure. It's doing nothing good. We should consider the American model of voting for your local sheriff or police chief. If Fishhook's got its own police chief, elected, answerable to the tax collectors, the ratepayers and the homeowners, if you've got Parow, Belleville, Mitchell's Plain, Malay Quarter, all with their own, they will re-establish, they will get community spirit, and they will now feel our voice matters, and they will have every reason to make their area better. And after a while, you'll have competition. I mean, who can have the most beautiful gardens, verges, most efficient, the cleanest, and it would work. But the Uni City kills all that because it doesn't matter what you do, Because somebody who doesn't care about you, probably from Transkei, is running the whole show at City Council, and he doesn't care. A local police force, answerable to the municipalities, controlled by homeowners and ratepayers, will quickly restore law and order on a local municipal level. Tourists are attracted to beauty in nature and in clean, safe, neat environments. They are not attracted by deforestation. It would be essential to restore our beaches, our parks, our forests and our mountains by eradicating crime, violence, litter, pollution and eyesores. These are the enemies of tourism and of job creation. Mosquitoes breed in stagnant waters. In order to get rid of the flies, you close the trash can. You move it out of the kitchen. And so by moving the political trough for parasites and political opportunists, public life can be cleaned up. No career politician should be tolerated.
Amen.
No pensions for elected officials. No high salaries for elected officials. Mayors, town councillors, premiers and members of parliament should receive no more salary than what a teacher, policeman, nurse or fireman gets. And no corruption should be tolerated. It should be treason of the highest order to be corrupt. Because you're stealing from everyone. Corruption and inflation steals the most. Socialism, affirmative action, usury, corruption destroy economies. Honest money is needed. I mean, do you know, for 800 years, Byzantine had the same price for bread and everything else.
Oh.
They had a gold-based currency, money meant the same thing, and there was no usury allowed whatsoever. For 800 years they sustained it in the Byzantine Empire. The Byzantine Empire lasted 1,000 years. Our entire banking system needs to be reformed by abolishing usury. By ensuring that only taxpayers and homeowners vote in municipal elections, you'll quickly withdraw the incentive for the many welfare junkies and economic parasites who want to flock into the area. Those on social grants and welfare have forfeited their right to vote. And so in the interest of removing conflicts of interest, those who need to be on any form of social welfare should not be voting on how to use the money of others. I mean, it's just basic. Now, our people love their sports and that's all fine, but isn't it interesting our city could build something like this? Well, why can't we build a whole lot more?
Exactly.
So, when you look at municipal elections, it's quite clear that people in the Western Cape consistently vote against the ANC. We are not the same as the rest of the country. And so why should we be part of their control? Now, what potential voting blocks can be mobilized? Ratepayers. By handing back municipal control to ratepayers, I think any ratepayer understands the issues would say, Cape Independence is what I'm behind. Homeowners. By granting homeowners primary control of municipalities, these are the people who've got the biggest stake in the community, and they're responsible people. They're not transients. They're the ones who committed to paying the bonds, and they're the ones who got kids to raise and all the rest.
Yeah.
I mean, let them have the stake in the community. The people own their own homes. And parents, by handing back control of schools to the local community and to the parents. When they understand that, we're going to get the control, I think they'll support Cape Independence. Conservationists, environmentalists. There's a lot of us in the Cape. And by reforesting the Cape, I think there'd be a lot of people cheering for that. We want to see our forests back. This is a picture taken by my daughter, Daniela, in Germany recently. That's what we want the Cape to be. Forest, and used to be like this. The people who've chopped down our trees and our forests by the millions are criminals. We need to get back to reforesting Cape. And I tell you, just take like this in Germany, where they have these crossing points designed to, with vegetation, so that herds of animals who on their migrations won't endanger the traffic and they won't be endangered by the traffic. That's thoughtful. And when you do that sort of thing, there's a lot of Greens, environmentalists and conservatives who would be cheering. There's a lot of people who would cheer if we became a green city saying we're abolishing plastic bags. Bring your own bags, buy a cloth bag, or use paper bags. We can issue with paper bags, but the hell with plastic bags. It's strangling our oceans. It's killing how much wildlife. We can't afford it. If people are so irresponsible as to litter, we can't allow them to have litter that isn't biodegradable. Waging war on litter and pollution, cleaning up our beaches, oceans and parks, criminalizing litter and pollution. Because that's what's chasing away so much of the tourists, killing jobs and killing our wildlife and ocean life. any anti-animal policies needs to be cracked down on. There are a lot of us who will cheerfully support a pro-conservation, pro-wildlife. There are many groups in this town who will move heaven and earth to get Cape Independence if they realise it's going to save the lives of hundreds of thousands of animals who are suffering under this cursed ANC government's policy. I think even the birds will be voting for us if they understand what's going on. This is what you need to see. A city where the police are concerned to stop traffic to let the ducks get across the road. If we can't be compassionate to God's creatures, then we don't deserve to exist. And I think that a city that's got compassion for the animals and lives next to wildlife, it's even more attractive to the tourist, and it's something that I think your conservationists are going to get very much behind Cape Independence. There's a lot of us animal activists who, we closed down our mission both in 1994 and 2000 with the fuel crisis and the oil pollution in our oceans to rescue the penguins. And it was interesting. The governments caused the problems, like in 2000, by not dealing with this 18-meter wide hole by metal fatigue in this Chinese oil tanker. And this was coming for weeks. And, oh, who's going to pay for pumping the oil off, and who's going to do this? And in the end, this ship sank in Table Bay, and people like us, volunteers, World Wildlife Fund, SANCOM, cleaned up, fed the penguins, released them, and you know, on the day that the penguins got released, which was 100% done by individuals, this wasn't done by the government. The government did nothing. But on the day that the penguins were released, some cabinet minister got on the beach and photobombed for the Argus front page, as though they hadn't put any money into it, they hadn't done any work. They caused a problem. Free enterprise and volunteers, something in the region of 28,000 volunteers, solved the problem, rescued 50,000 penguins, and the biggest penguin rescue in history. And this blasted government somehow got themselves on the front page on the day that we released the first ones at Milnerton on Tableview. Unreal. And then what has this government done? They have sent up people to shoot all of our mountain goats, and I'm glad we still got a couple of them up there. These mountain goats that lived in Table Mountain for ages, they said, oh, they're alien. You know, well, so are you. But this business of hunting out of mountain goats, I've hiked Table Mountain, I remember you've seen them everywhere. Now it's rare to see a mountain goat up there. Thankfully some have survived, but honestly, we should protect them. They should be considered endangered species, which our politicians are not. No one in the world needs a rhino horn except a rhino. And so, again, protecting the rhinos, banning canned line hunting, ensuring that animals aren't bred for the bullets and the bow is critical. I mean, we have a lot of animal welfare people in the Western Cape, and I think if we plug into them, we're going to find a huge amount of, not just supporters, but activists, people who get out there in the streets. You know, yeah, I mean, what are you doing for conservation? Then there's the pro-lifers, very active. By defunding abortion and streamlining adoption, we will get a lot of people. There's a lot of people who will vote for the chance for a referendum on abortion because we're convinced we're going to win this one. But abortion is child abuse. It's a national shame, and it's outrageous that while you can get an abortion for 800 Rand, to adopt costs 80,000 Rand plus. This government has made it so complicated, so difficult, so unbelievably obstructionist to adopt a child, when it's cheaper to kill a child than to adopt it. Something's radically sick. Then there's the investors. When I understand, Cape Independence means abolishing VAT and replacing it with something like total economic activity levy. It's been proven that 1% total economic activity levy on all bank transactions automatically electronically deducted will bring in more income than all of our VAT and income tax combined does now. You may say, how's that possible? The key thing is, it's got to be across the board, including Anglo-American and De Beers and Sanlam and all the rest.
And the government.
VAT and GST and income tax can be abolished. Replaced with a simple deduction of 1% or less. Because, let's face it, most of what government does isn't needed, and most of what they have they steal. I think a quarter of 1% would be more than enough for what they need. In fact, I think we can phase it out pretty quick, and I'm sure you've got some great ideas about that. But what we've got to agree on is VAT and GST have to go. Income tax go. Now, if the businessmen know that they'll be welcome we're going to abolish bureaucratic, time-wasting, expensive red tape. That'll get a lot of people excited. Do you know, in Rwanda, it's the only country in Africa where to open up a business, you only need to fill out one page. That's it. Now, Rwanda is attracting investors because they've made it easy for investors. We are deterring investors in this country right now. Who are the other people we could appeal to? Cyclists. There's a lot of cyclists, and by securing pathways, bridges, and underpasses for cyclists, like Holland. Holland's very friendly to cyclists, and that would help solve some of our traffic problems anyway. Then there's runners. My son's one of them. You secure parks, forests, long-distance runs that are clean and safe. Runners will be enthusiastic. And hikers. We've got a lot of hikers out there, and if you secure safe, clean, reforested mountains, Wood Mountain goes perfectly, you will find a lot of hikers will get excited. And then there's all the different people in the harbour who want clean harbours. I mean, my wife is seriously into dragon boating. Then there's the religious communities. By respecting freedom of religion and refusing intrusive interference and harassment by government, Christians and Muslims and others will be ecstatic. Families. By protecting the right of parents to protect their children being restored and their control of education being given back to the parents, we could convince a lot of parents that this is a good way to go. Alex de Tocqueville said equality is a slogan based on envy. It signifies nobody is going to occupy a high place in life. Egalitarianism is just envy, jealousy, it's mean-spirited. Now, thou shalt not kill, put in the positive is you shall preserve life. And so one of the best ways to fight crime is to enable people to have weapons for self-defense. The Second Amendment in America, which means the right of people to keep and bear arms, has made more women equal than the entire feminist movement has in all of their worthless existence. Letting a woman have a weapon is going to do far more than any piece of paper. By respecting the right to self-defense, by respecting freedom of religion, sanctity of life, sanctity of property, freedom of speech, freedom of communications, we can make the Cape a beacon of hope, such as Switzerland has been for centuries. Switzerland, I mean, it just epitomizes excellence, and it's so decentralized and it's so free. Starting with Bern, this is one of their capitals, but most people wouldn't even know Bern's a capital because they have these local community gatherings like this, where the people decide on things openly, and referendums. This is the way to go. And Switzerland doesn't have an army, Switzerland is an army. So, if we go this way, we're going to get some storms, we're going to get some opposition. But Cape Town knows about storms and opposition because we have a cold Atlantic Ocean and a warm Indian Ocean, and we get storms and we get buffeted. And we can take the storms that come if we have a control of our own future. And yes, there's going to be opposition, there'll be criticism, there'll be people who will misunderstand, but we've got to be like that beacon and like that lighthouse standing there and just knowing we can take it. And they can say what they want. We'll prove them wrong with facts. By being a tax haven with minimal taxes and no usury tolerant in the banks, Cape Town can exceed, I believe, the economic success of Hong Kong and Singapore. I think we can do better than them. Why aim just to be as good? Think of what we can do with the tourism. We've got phenomenal resources here. And Cape Town will be a Cape International Conference Centre. People come from around the world, and imagine if we're running our own city, not having some foreigners. So, who are our potential allies and how can we reach them? The Colours, the Malays, the Afrikaans speakers in the Western Cape will all be attracted by the prospect of regaining control over their own communities and respect for their language. Afrikaans has been in the Cape longer than English, and it should be respected as a national language. And I think the Cape Malays are frustrated with what's going on. I think they would be ecstatic to be part of this kind of movement. There's communities out there that feel alienated. There's all kinds of communities. Environmentalists and conservationists like Sandcob will be attracted by a high priority for conservation and animal welfare. We've got the only African penguins in the world. And making a stand for sea life, protecting marine life, standing against the abuse of dolphins. You know, a person's heart can be measured by how they regard cats. And if a person doesn't like animals, you know, there's something wrong with them. Neighborhood watches, Ratepayer associations will be attracted by policies of decentralization and placing policing back in the hands of municipalities and communities. Neighborhood watchers are your most vigilant, diligent, sacrificial, good neighbors, and I believe they are the kind of people who should, because right now, our neighborhood watchers' hands are tied. They're virtually not allowed to do anything except watch. We need to give them power because it's their community. Businesses and investors will be attracted to the abolition of taxes and the restoration of honest money and a tax haven, especially if they know they're not likely to get mugged in the streets while coming here. So, where's the potential media outlets? It's possible that some community radio stations like Radio Tygerberg, CCFM, Radio Cape Pulpit, other community stations may be open to bold, fresh, innovative ideas. Community newspapers should be approached, but there's the web, there's emails, there's Twitter accounts, there's Vimeo, YouTube, Facebook. Social media is what got the Trump revolution successful. There's a lot of things we can do on the absolute plethora of social media that's available to us. Post the truth, whether they love you, hate you, unfriend you, or block you. We're not here to feed and entertain the goats, we're here to feed the sheep. Effective video documentaries and video clips promoting aspects of these solutions need to be edited and produced. Public meetings need to be considered. And marches. Marches need to be considered. Cape Town has shown we can have big marches, and we've led some big marches to Parliament, and I believe that we can mobilize the people step by step. Our prisons are overcrowded, our criminal justice system has failed, foreign criminals need to be expelled and banned from returning. That would be a very cheap solution. Pollsmoor's a disgrace. It's absolutely criminal, the overcrowding going on there, and many of the people there shouldn't even be there because it's often little, and you know, if it's a property crime trial, then why not restorative justice? Why not paying restitution to the victim? Pollsmoor can kill you. I mean, people can go and being a petty blue-collar crime type worker, next thing you know they're with hardened criminals, and the prison system needs to be phased out, replaced with restorative justice for minor crimes like restitution. Restitution to the victims of crime should be normal, execution for murder and rape should be considered and be a subject for referendum, which I think there'd be some support for. But respecting the right to self-defense and placing no unreasonable obstacles
I like this
in the
picture.
way of law-abiding citizens to obtain firearms for self-defense is critical. This would have a massive deterrent effect on violent crime. There's no better defense for a country than armed citizenry, as Switzerland has proved. So who are political allies in the political realm? I don't know how many there are, but I would recommend that one approach Stephen Midford Goodson of the Abolish Usury Party for advice on economic models that could work in reviving our economy in the Cape, and he's got some fresh ideas. Usury leads to slavery. Imagine 1 penny loaned on January the 1st, 81, drawing interest on a rate of 6%, compounded annually by 1895, would amount to a hang of a lot of money, in the beyond quintillions, which just on a 6% interest rate. So to pay this, I mean, which originally was just a penny, it would be more gold than we've got on this planet, and it would take those many spheres or hemispheres, planets, to be able to gain the money to pay that. So this is just to illustrate the insanity of usury, of interest. We are being destroyed by these so-called reserve banks, which have no reserves, are not banks, they're frauds. When I was growing up, city councillors and members of parliament were not actually paid for their service. They received only basic expenses and had to have real jobs to sustain themselves. Like my history teacher in Rhodesia, who was a member of parliament as well. Today, unfortunately, it would seem that all too many in what is meant to be public service see it as an opportunity for being self-serving criminals to loot public resources. And the Cape has been looted for far too long. In fact, they say that 25% of the total wealth of Africa is stolen by corruption. So corruption steals from absolutely everyone, and it chases away tourists, it chases away investors, it chases away job creators, it devalues our currency. It reduces the value of everyone's savings, earnings, and pensions. It implodes and erodes any economy. Corruption is worse, more than any other single cause, it's more responsible for the poverty and joblessness in our society. So, we need Cape solutions. Free the Cape.